issuing digital securities. Everybody today, I think, has heard of digital assets in some form. Certainly everybody has heard of things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and there's a huge amount of hype about them right now. Even 6 months ago, digital assets were still a bit more fringe. You know, a lot of people were curious about them, but they honestly were very far from being mainstream. Today, I think digital assets are mainstream enough, in the sense that not everybody owns Bitcoin, not every financial institution is involved in the digital security space, but everybody is thinking about it. And I think everybody realizes that this is the future. Real brief though, when I talk about digital securities, what I mean by this is, you know, there's an ongoing trend in capital markets today around dematerialization, basically taking physical paper share certificates and turning them into something else. And that something else is really what we Fusang are interested in. You know, a lot of people are shocked when I tell them that in a lot of jurisdictions, like Hong Kong, for example, Hong Kong companies still have physical paper shares. I mean, literal touch and feel paper shares. And that blows people's minds. You know, when I tell them that, they don't believe me. They say, you're pulling my foot. It's not possible. In 2021, we still have these slips of paper. It's just that they don't see them. You have intermediaries, company secretaries, custodians, etc., who handle all of that paper on people's behalf. But it's not that they don't exist. But I don't think that just taking a paper share certificate and turning it into a PDF is good enough. You know, to me, that's a very sort of thin level of benefit. Yes, you've gotten rid of the physical paper, but honestly, as far as a technologist is concerned, it's still not what I would call digital native, right? It's not something that is interactable digitally or with a program. And that's why we Fusang are most interested in this, blockchain-based digital securities, where we have taken that physical paper share certificate and replaced it with a blockchain-based token. And honestly, that is all Fusang is interested in doing. A lot of people are trying to create entirely new asset classes or new legal structures. I don't think it's necessary. You know, I think that the concept of a share or a bond or a fund is fine. There's nothing wrong with the legal concept. The problem is the paperwork, the mounds and mounds of paperwork, and quite frankly, the layers and layers of intermediaries. That's the big problem that we have in capital markets today. And just by swapping out a paper share certificate for a digital token, we can already have massive benefits. And I'm not going to go through all these lists of examples, for example, that we have here, except to say that more and more banks and financial institutions have created digital bonds, for example, based on these blockchain-based tokens. The thing is, right now, most of these projects, even though they have created the bond, there's nowhere for them to get listed and traded. And that's why Fusang Exchange exists, right? We are the secondary market listing and trading venue for all of these digital issuances. So the next question is, well, why? Right? Beyond, I guess, the operational benefits of swapping out a paper share certificate for a digital token, why would a company be interested in a digital security? Because to me, the first level benefit of any digital technology is always better, cheaper, faster, etc. Right? It always, oops, sorry, getting a bit of echo. The first level benefit is always that you know, digital means more efficient, but that's not good enough. That's a very thin level. Any good digital technology brings with it an entirely new model, so to speak, an operating model of how people can interact in an environment. And obviously in capital markets, that means issuers and investors. Today, capital markets are split into public and private, and they're really two very different environments. If you are a public company listed on a public stock exchange, it's a whole different world for you. When you need to raise capital, when you want to issue a bond, for example, you can go out there and talk to a whole slew of investment banks who are for themselves to do business. When you are a private company and you want to raise capital, it's a much lonelier environment. Your options really are talking to friends and family, going out to a bank and raising a term loan, or maybe talking to a VC fund. But it's a very different universe than the public capital markets. And I think that digital securities is going to start to blur that line when the public and the private markets increasingly look the same. And the question then becomes, how are companies going to be able to place their securities to what I call their own stakeholder base, people who already know and use and interact with the company. And it's going to be less about the operational mechanics, which is really what we see in capital markets today, and filling this nice little box here. You know, the number of companies in the world today that are public is less than 1%. This is the other 99% of companies that have been just left out, really, of global capital markets. So what can we do about that? Again, right, to me, digital goes beyond just better, cheaper, quicker, faster. Right now, if you are an individual, especially if you're a retail investor, you need to go to lots of different venues in terms of transacting in some of these products. You can go to traditional exchanges, and you're going to need to figure out connectivity across multiple exchange venues to trade these public stocks. If you want to access alternative asset classes, private markets, it's very difficult if you are a retail investor. And honestly, your only choice right now is to look at using proxies of some kind. To me, that's why the SPAC boom has taken off at such great velocity. I've heard SPACs described as a poor man's private equity fund. And to me, the reason why SPACs have exploded in volume are precisely because lots and lots of retail investors, more and more retail investors, it's causing that echo. If someone on my team could just help mute everyone else while I talk. More and more people are looking for something that they can't get on traditional public markets, right? As I said, SPACs are one way of them doing so. Digital, again, we think uniquely combines all of these things into a single access channel. And again, the reason why I know that this is so appealing to individual investors, especially retail investors, is that you see this happening with things like the crypto markets. Again, I think let's call it the ICO markets, where you have these tokens that are not securities, that are not really backed by anything. Honestly, I think that 95% of companies in that space are scams. But still, I think that they are a very interesting proof of concept. They've showed the overwhelming interest that individuals have in getting this kind of single platform access to radically different assets, to radically different companies. And we see this, I'm actually gonna skip all this. We see this because of the insane volume that you see in the digital asset market. You know, I hear a lot of financial institutions say things like, crypto is interesting, but the market is still too small. And if you think about this in terms of market cap, that's true. Even with the huge rise of, let's say, Bitcoin prices, the total digital asset market cap today is, let's call it 1.5 trillion. That's very small compared to even something like Apple stock at 2.5 trillion. It's not, the entire asset class is not even the market cap of one stock. But the real story is not market cap. To me, the real story is these two bars, volume. Last year, 2020, global public market equity volume daily averaged out to about, let's call it 220 billion. That means that every single day on average, $220 billion worth of stock was transacted. This is all public market equities everywhere. You can see today, total digital asset volume daily is already a significant fraction of that, about 160 billion. And I'm willing to bet that by end of this year, that will actually be greater, meaning that every single day, more money will change hands in terms of digital assets than in terms of all global equities everywhere. To give you a very specific example, Today, Apple stock turns over about $10 billion a day worth of transaction volume. Bitcoin turns over anywhere from $50 to $60 billion a day. So Bitcoin has 5 to 6x the volume of something like Apple stock. Bitcoin is a deeper and more liquid market than Apple stock and just about any stock on the planet. That to me is the real story. And as an issuer or as a financial institution looking to help issuers think about whether or not they create digital securities, to me, the single question that you should be asking is, what is driving this gold bar right here? Why? Why does this asset class have a volume like nothing the world has ever seen before? I think there are a few reasons. Today, if a traditional institution wants to think about a digital security, they really can't access what I call a B2C channel, right? Again, the capital markets today are B2B2C, they're intermediated. I, as an individual retail investor, cannot walk onto the floor of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and buy stock. I have to go through a broker. This is not how any other industry works in today's digital world, right? What customers want today is B2C, direct access to consumers, and they expect this to happen in a single platform. I go to Amazon precisely because Amazon is the single platform that stands between buyer and seller, and they take care of the entire fulfillment chain underneath. Instead of me going to, for those of you sitting in Hong Kong, somewhere like Lane Crawford, where I as the consumer know that I'm paying a markup because someone has to pay for the rent and the marble and the sales staff and all of that. Quite frankly, I go to Lane Crawford, I look at stuff, and then I order it on Amazon, right? I try on the clothes, then I order it online because it's cheaper and it comes in a few days. I think the exact same thing is not just going to happen, but is already happening in financial markets. This demand driver that you see here, right? That's what is driving the SPAC industry. That is what is driving the crazy crypto boom that's going on right now. The minute people can go B2C, things explode, at least in terms of trading volume. The problems are, as you see now, issuers don't know how to do it. They say, I like the idea, but I find it very scary, right? I don't know how to even begin thinking about issuing a blockchain-based security, and there just aren't a lot of platforms to help them do so. There are lots and lots of people who will do one slice of the value chain. Someone might help them create a digital token, or someone might help them with the secondary trading bit. No one is really helping issuers go end to end. And the analogy I always give is, imagine if you were a seller trying to sell your goods on Amazon, and Amazon said, look, I'll do everything, but you got to figure out your own warehousing and maybe pick your own shipping provider and get back to us when you've picked your shipping service. It just doesn't work that way. People need a single A to Z platform who can help them do both execution and fulfillment. Very transparently, that's exactly what Fusang was built to do. Right? We knew from day one that we had to create a platform that we could both straddle the sort of new digital technology, but also be able to fit into existing regulatory boxes, which I think is very important. And I'll talk a bit about that in a second. We needed to provide that A to Z fulfillment chain between issuers and investors as a single platform. And obviously, it had to be digital. This point, honestly, nobody even challenges me on anymore. But even 6 months ago, people were asking me, why do I need digital? Right? Traditional stock exchanges work fine. I like ringing a bell. It's cool. Post-COVID, nobody says that anymore. Again, I won't dig too much into sort of the operational mechanics. I think we won't have much time in this call, and happy to take questions later in terms of each of these line item verticals and etc. But Fusang, as I said, we built a single platform where we can take everyone from the investor onboarding in terms of the digital identity, which is important because the way in which we create these digital securities, these are not just random tokens. These are not bearer shares. These are equivalent to any traditional share certificate, just in digital form. And like all share certificates, they need to be registered in someone's name. We've built this platform in the middle, the Fusang Vault, to act as a fully licensed custodian where we can both take possession of these assets, but also provide all of the asset servicing jobs around these assets, meaning doing things like acting as transfer agent, keeping the register of members, the cap table updated, etc. And then, of course, we built the exchange as the public market listing and trading venue. Again, gonna skip over most of these things and we can jump back to them later if people are interested. And just perhaps finish off by talking about this, which is, in the early days of Fusang, we tried very hard to go and work with a lot of traditional investment banks to say, you know what, we'll divert issuers to these investment banks. The investment banks will do the normal job in terms of putting together the structuring, helping them sort out all of the legal paperwork, and then they can come to us. We'll help them issue the digital tokens and then get them listed and traded. And we, I think, have realized that this doesn't work. That, again, just like the Amazon model, both issuers and investors need a single A to Z platform where they trust someone like Fusang will just help them do all of the intermediate steps. And that's why we've created this model where we say, if an issuer comes to us, we can basically roll out a template package, whether they want to issue equities, bonds, or funds. We can help them create the SPVs, do the legal structuring, including helping them file a public offering prospectus if need be for a public listing, all the way through to issuing the token, getting it listed and traded on the Fusang Exchange, and then everything obviously that comes after that. We very transparently are not an investment bank. It's not our job to help issuers figure out what they're selling, for example, to help them structure their issuance. But once an issuer engages with a partner or an advisory firm, or decides to do it themselves and figure out what they're selling, for example, that they want to issue 20% new shares at a $10 million valuation, and these are how, this is how the shares are going to work, like any issuance, we can help them with this template process, right? We have done this before in terms of understanding how to create these SPV issuer companies, in terms of how to get these prospectuses filed with our regulators, all the way through to allowing retail investors to subscribe and then trade for these assets in the public markets, including allowing these retail investors to subscribe in both a range of fiat currencies and also in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, stablecoins, etc. I'm going to pause there because I realize I have rambled on for quite a long time and would love to see if anyone on the call has any questions, including you, Peter, as you mentioned, because I love it when people say they are new to the space. You're on, let me try and unmute you.
Hopefully your slides will be available after this.
Absolutely, they are. And I think if you joined here through our Shiny New Fusang community, there actually should be a whole issuers course in our community that if someone can help find a link and paste into the chat, that would be really helpful. To be honest, our community is like 1 week old, so we're busy trying to create new content and fill things in there. So apologies if there are gaps in that issuers course, but you should be able to find a sort of A to Z walkthrough in terms of how our process works, fees, all the rest of it. But I guess conceptually, we'd love to hear if you have any particular questions, Peter, in terms of, digital securities as a whole versus paper securities.
Well, unfortunately, I'm of an age which this is, I was brought up with pounds, shillings, and pence, and was a manager of a merchant bank, and one liked to see the to actually hold the paper in your hand and say this was worth. It is difficult for me. I mean, you talked about, for example, Bitcoin, and if I wear my trustee's hat, it is not an investment that I would recommend, to a family office, because it is so volatile. It's and it is, to me, not backed with anything. yeah, I know Musk has gone in a huge way,
Mhm.
but since he's gone in, he's dropped something like $1.5 billion in the value of his company's shares.
Yes,
But it's not real. Fusang,
yes.
however, is not Bitcoin, and I your explanation actually made it much clearer to me that there are so many companies out there which aren't public, which do
Mhm.
require finance for whatever purpose, and will not get it from the traditional banks. Well, they could, but it's short term. It's probably expensive, and so, albeit brief, explanation that it will appear as a listing and freely available on a B2C basis.
Mhm.
No stockbrokers involved. How much easier? Because as you know, I came to LeBron 2.5 years ago, and one of the first things I did was looked for the stockbroker.
Mhm.
Well, you don't have stockbrokers in the
Yes,
traditional sense. I mean,
yes.
I can go to Maybank or whatever and say,
Mhm.
can your KL office buy some shares for me? But it's not the same.
Mhm.
And so it is a steep learning curve for me, but
Mhm.
uh, that's why I'm joining your masterclass, because
I
I
appreciate
think
it.
it is going to be the future. I
Yeah.
really do.
Well,
Uh,
I obviously agree.
yeah.
I think that the what you talked about when you talked about physical pounds notes, I think that's a great analogy because obviously most people, most of their net worth is held in bank accounts, where it is in some sense digital. It's
Yes.
the technologists, I call it a ledger representation. But basically, HSBC doesn't have a big vault somewhere where they keep all of their cash. It's just, entries in a database. But
Yes.
people still trust it because they say nothing has changed about the underlying asset. It's still the same pound. It's just that
Yes.
before we had slips of paper, now it's a line in my online banking accounts. Same thing. I don't really get how the tech works, but I trust that when I go to an ATM, my money comes out. And at least at Fusang, that's what we believe we need to get to with digital security space. We need to be able to tell people, don't worry, whether you have a paper share certificate or a blockchain-based token, it's the same thing. There's no fundamental difference. I get that, you don't need to understand how the blockchain tech works. You just need to be able to trust that this is how you can see your shares, how you can trade them, how you can move them around. For example, Fusang today, we have digitized 100% of our own shares. You can view this on the blockchain if you go to fsc.fusang.co. Type that in some chat somewhere so people can see if they want. You can see our blockchain-based cap table. You don't really need to understand where it comes from or how it works. You just need to know that you can go to that link and you can see the transactions, right? And really, that's why, obviously, I think companies like Fusang are useful to the market, that we step in as that infrastructure platform exactly to help people take care of all of these jobs so that they don't have to figure it out on their own. And the challenge to me and to the entire industry is, how do we find the underlying assets and the companies that are actually most interesting for people to trade, where exactly as you say, it is backed by something, right? These are real securities, real equity or bonds or etc. There is an underlying valuation and it's a high quality asset. Right? We need to be able to bring these companies to market and show people that crypto doesn't need to equal volatile. It doesn't certainly need to equal scam, right? These things can just be shares. And whether or not a company is a good company is based on whether or not they're a good company. Nothing to do with the format of their shares. Could be paper, could be digital. That should be irrelevant. Technology is purely a layer to make it easier for issuers to place their securities to a larger group of people than ever before. And likewise, it means that a larger group of investors than ever before could buy things. No different than when you buy a table on Amazon, whether you buy it at Lane Crawford, you're still buying a table. Nothing's changed about that sort of the underlying. It's just purely the interactivity, right? The idea that I can now buy a table from anyone, anywhere, get it shipped to anywhere. To me, that's where the capital markets need to end up, where you say, yeah, I can buy shares of the company from anywhere I want to. And it doesn't matter where I sit, I can buy those shares freely, and vice versa. Issuers can issue to their whole global client base. Because what I find curious right now is that more and more you're having a very new kind of company existing in today's world, where I can set up a company in my living room. I can manufacture, I don't know, let's say I want to set up a iPhone case manufacturer. I don't know why I thought of that as an example, but I could run this business during COVID without leaving my house. I could get manufacturing and prototyping done in China. I could set up an online store with Amazon and sell and ship globally. I can communicate with a global audience and stakeholder base on social media. I can run global ad campaigns on Instagram. Everything has become globalized, digital, direct to consumer, B2C, right? That's how we run everything in every modern business today. But if those same businesses, let's say I'm doing really well and I'm selling millions of phone cases, if I want to raise money, capital, so I can expand and grow my business, I go to my local bank and ask for a loan. It's very strange that, again, everything else in the world works this way, except finance and except capital markets. And I cannot imagine a world in which in the years to come, this goes the way of everything else, right? And I believe that because it's nothing new, right? This is how everything else in the world works. How exactly those mechanisms will work, obviously we Fusang have specific ideas, but however this all plays out, I cannot imagine that in 5 years' time, we're still going to have these physical pieces of paper with chops and signatures and all the rest of it.
Yeah. I had a quick look on my other computer. I looked at the FSC.
Yes.
It came up straight away. It's all there. It just like exactly. my own share registers, which I produce.
Absolutely. And again, to me, same thing, right? Nothing's changed about the underlying format. And look, Fusang is, I think, a bit unique in the sense that there are lots of people trying to create what I call digital native tokens, where these things are digital securities, but they're not shares, they're not bonds, they're not funds, they're a new creature. And who knows, maybe I think there are merits to that approach as well. Fusang's tried to keep things really, really simple. We just say, look, there's nothing wrong with the concept of shares. It's the paperwork that's the problem.
Yeah.
Good. I wonder if anyone else has any questions. Like I said, we set this up as a live call, which I know is sometimes a bit surprising to people when you're used to sort of webinars. But if you have any questions, feel free to just jump on video or unmute yourself and ask away. In the meantime, I'm told by my team that the issuers course is still work in progress. So that's coming. But I will type another link in here. If you go to community.fusang.co, I assume most of you will have signed up for this event through our community, which, by the way, we have a shiny new mobile app, which you can get on whatever your local app store is. You should just be able to search for our name, Fusang, and that should pop up. But beyond that, go into our community, check it out. We will be pushing more and more information about all of this. Soon, hopefully, we'll get our course on digital security, in terms of how to actually issue digital securities using the Fusang platform. That should head up there. Yeah, look forward to seeing all of you guys on similar iterations of this. I think we'll be planning to do these kind of short half-an-hour calls every other week to talk about the issuance process and just answer live questions to anybody who has specific issues around how to think about digital securities, how to issue them. Anyway, if there are no other questions, I really appreciate everything that you asked, Lisa. Like I said, I look forward to having you on the masterclass, and I appreciate you signing up, and would love to have you participate in the community. And if you have similar questions, just post in the community, and I'm sure somebody will answer. It may not even be from Fusang. The whole idea behind this community is to create a space where people can interact with each other, right? Where it's not just driven by us, and we can all share knowledge as we plow into this brave new world.
Excellent stuff. Henry, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.